Chapter 3: The Age of Gunpowder and Naval Dominance. Moving forward in time, Dr. Abbas traced the transformation that occurred with the advent of gunpowder, which changed the nature of warfare. She focused her study on two key empires, the British and the Ottoman, both of whom mastered naval power and artillery to project dominance far beyond their shores. In the archives of Istanbul, she found records from the Ottoman Empire's siege of Constantinople, where artillery had been used to break through walls that had stood for centuries. Meanwhile, in London, she explored how the British Empire's control of the seas had allowed it to build colonies across the world. The British Navy's motto, "Rule Britannia," wasn't just a patriotic song. It was a declaration of their imperial strategy. To rule the seas was to rule the world. Dr. Abbas noted how these lessons endured in modern naval and air force strategies. Even today, countries with powerful navies hold sway over international trade routes and often project their power across the globe. Control over the seas, air, and even space had become the new high ground, an idea born from these ancient and early modern empires. Chapter 4: The Ideologies of Empire. But perhaps the most enduring influence of ancient empires was not their tactics or their conquests, but their ideologies. As she continued her research, Dr. Abbas discovered that many modern leaders were deeply inspired by the ideals of glory and destiny that had driven ancient kings and emperors. Whether it was Alexander's quest to spread Greek culture or the Roman Empire's belief in its civilizing mission, ancient empires had framed their conquests as part of a noble vision. In modern times, she saw this rhetoric echoing in phrases like spreading democracy, manifest destiny, or preserving civilization. These ideas justified wars not as acts of conquest, but as moral obligations, noble missions to improve the world. Dr. Abbas realized that while the language had changed, the justification for power remained strikingly similar. Her findings were met with skepticism and intrigue by academics and military strategists alike. Many were reluctant to acknowledge that the wars they fought today were influenced by leaders long dead. But as she shared her research, the truth became impossible to deny. The influence of ancient empires on modern warfare was not limited to tactics. It was rooted in ideologies, ambitions, and the eternal human desire for power and control. Chapter 5: Lessons Carried Forward. Dr. Abbas's journey ended where it began, back in the desert near Babylon, with the words of Hammurabi inscribed on the ancient clay. She stood before the ruins, pondering the journey humanity had taken from the earliest city-states to the modern superpowers. Perhaps, she thought, the only way forward is to learn not only from our ancient triumphs, but from our ancient mistakes. The cycles of conquest and rebellion, of power and resistance, would likely continue. But with greater awareness of their origins, perhaps modern civilizations could break the cycle, building peace not on the ambitions of empire, but on a shared understanding of their past. In time, her findings would be published, her research challenging world leaders to see beyond the framework of conquest and domination. It was a call to honor the past while refusing to repeat its mistakes, a reminder that true progress came not from imitating ancient empires, but from transcending them. The echoes of history's empires would always be there, whispering of strength, glory, and dominion. But perhaps, for the first time, humanity could let those whispers fade, leaving the lessons of empire to the history books, and choosing instead to write a different story for the future. From empire to empire, ancient history's influence on modern warfare. In the dawn of civilization, when human societies were still discovering their power, empires rose from humble settlements into sprawling kingdoms. From the steppes of Central Asia To the fertile crescent of Mesopotamia, from the desert sands of Egypt to the marble cities of Greece, leaders forged nations through conquest and strategy. They waged wars not only with swords and spears, but with ideas, tactics, philosophies, and ambitions that would survive long after their empires fell, echoing through the ages. Our story begins in a forgotten village near the ruins of Babylon, where an archaeologist named Dr. Leon Abbas and her young assistant, Thomas Malik, uncovered an artifact that would alter their understanding of warfare's roots in their own century. Dr. Abbas had dedicated her life to tracing the connections between ancient warfare and today's global conflicts, suspecting that the ideologies of early empires still held sway over modern leaders and armies. One day, as Dr. Abbas and Thomas dusted off stone tablets beneath the relentless desert sun, they uncovered a relic, an ornate clay cylinder inscribed with cuneiform. The words, carefully deciphered by Dr. Abbas, recounted a decree from King Hammurabi himself, detailing tactics of psychological warfare that the Babylonian army had used against its enemies. Hammurabi's strategy was one of fear. Messengers were sent to foreign lands with tales of Babylon's unstoppable armies, instilling terror long before a single soldier arrived. It was a strategy that Dr. Abbas had seen used in modern times, even in her own country. Powerful nations often propagated fear to weaken their enemies without firing a shot. This, she realized, was an ancient technique, dressed up in modern language, but the heart of it, the desire to conquer through intimidation, was as old as humanity's first kingdoms. Chapter 1. The Echoes of Rome. Dr. Abbas's fascination with ancient tactics deepened, and her research took her to Rome, the heart of one of history's greatest empires. Rome had crafted an empire that spanned continents, its legions an unstoppable force. But more than brute strength, Rome wielded strategic genius, psychological dominance, and engineering feats to cement its power. Its roads, built for swift military movement, stretched across Europe, Africa, and Asia, forming an intricate network that allowed armies to deploy anywhere with remarkable speed. As she walked along the ruins of the Appian Way, Dr. Abbas reflected on how Rome's approach still shaped military logistics today. During the Cold War, military highways and railroads were constructed across the United States and Russia, mirroring Rome's model. The goal was the same: to maintain rapid, ironclad control over distant territories and to deter potential invasions. Ancient Rome's desire to keep its territories under control through movement, accessibility, and intimidation had inspired not only modern warfare, but also global infrastructure. As Dr. Abbas continued her journey, she saw how even Rome's methods of psychological warfare, the glorification of the emperor, the intimidation of conquered peoples, the propaganda inscribed on triumphal arches, were echoed in the military parades, monuments, and televised displays of force seen in many modern nations. Chapter 2. The Mongol Legacy. Her research then took her east, into the lands once ruled by the Mongol Empire. No empire in history expanded as swiftly or brutally as the Mongols, who swept across Asia and into Europe with ferocity and speed that left kingdoms reeling. They employed terror as a tool, spreading stories of their unmatched ferocity and sparing no one who stood against them. In city after city, as Dr. Abbas learned, the Mongols would leave survivors to tell tales of their brutality, creating a reputation that alone often led cities to surrender without a fight. Dr. Abbas saw how this tactic of psychological terror still lived on. In modern conflicts, where asymmetrical warfare became common, armed groups and states alike often sought to instill fear through stories of extreme cruelty. In places where warfare was as much about controlling populations as it was about territory, terror remained a potent weapon. The Mongols had understood this centuries ago, and now, in an era of instant global communication, the principle of terrorizing one's enemies had only grown more pervasive.